Good evening, everybody. It's me, Drive Ghost, and today I'm going to be discussing a topic that I'm sure many of us have thought of since the reveal of the Viltrum Empire in the Invincible animated series, otherwise known as the, Amazon Prime original, even though it's not really original. Anyway, uh, many people have naturally compared the Viltrumites to Saiyans because there are many similarities between the two, or at least between the empires they were part of. Though I guess more specifically, it's a similarity between the Viltrum Empire and the Frieza Force, but point is, Saiyans and Viltrumites are very similar, and I'm not the first person to try and see a resemblance between the two in many ways. So I'm going to be discussing a pretty neat question, which is, how powerful would a Saiyan Viltrumite hybrid be? What would they be capable of? And how powerful would they be in Dragon Ball? Because, as we know, Dragon Ball's verse kind of outclasses Invincible, but if I remember to, I'll go ahead and discuss how they would stack up against the top tiers of the Invincible universe. Alright, let's get in. Now, there's some things to note first before we get into this. Viltrumites have dominant genetics, which typically makes it so that when they crossbreed, the Viltrumite genetics eventually overtake the other species. Like with Mark's half-brother Oliver, he had the purple skin and all that, and he was aging really fast, but eventually it leveled out, and he was just, much more Viltrumite, and eventually you couldn't really see the Thraxin in him at all. However, since Saiyans also seem to have dominant genetics with their hybrids, at least to a degree, a Saiyan Viltrumite hybrid could potentially more balance out, rather than one side being more prominent. But since this is shown more with Viltrumites, I would say it might be more like 60-40 between Viltrumite and Saiyan, leaning towards the Viltrumite side. But the point is, I don't think the Saiyan genetics would be, completely overtaken by Viltrumite genetics. Also, I will be taking Super Saiyan into account because that is something that you can achieve with training, and doesn't require, outside influence or something like that. I won't be taking into account the God forms because of the ritual for Super Saiyan God, which, yes, is just a shortcut, but in order to achieve it beyond that, you have to learn God Ki, which requires a God. So, because this hybrid could theoretically just train to get Super Saiyan, Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, all that stuff, I will be taking that into account, but not the God forms because, again, it's kinda unrealistic if you're not a main character. So before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the hybrid, let's first look at what each individual species has to offer, what they bring to the table that the other doesn't necessarily have, starting with Viltrumites. So, one very prominent ability for Viltrumites is their longevity. They can live for thousands of years. I think Omni-Man was either stated or implied to be over 2,000 years old. Then, there's Conquest there. So, they can live a really long time. They can also kind of travel through space, because while they can't breathe in space, Viltrumites can hold their breaths for weeks on end. So, they can kind of technically survive in space. I was going to say they can technically breathe in space, but that would have sounded stupid after I just said they can't. They also have enhanced regenerative abilities, to where if they get injured, obviously they won't be healing in seconds, but they can heal from very grievous injuries in pretty much no time flat. Well, not no time flat, sometimes it's a little bit inconsistent. Mark got impaled through the stomach and it took him a few months to regenerate, but obviously a human wouldn't be recovering from that anyway. They also have the natural ability to fly, whereas Saiyans supposedly have to kind of learn to fly a little bit. Obviously it will probably come naturally to them as they started to, naturally learn to manipulate Ki, which I'll get into later. But Viltrumites can naturally fly from what we've seen. Maybe they need a little bit of instruction, but Mark was able to fly without Omni-Man really teaching him. So those are the abilities Viltrumites bring to the table. What about Saiyans? The first thing to note is natural Ki manipulation. We've seen that even, like, baby Saiyans or very young Saiyans can manipulate ki. With relative ease, it seems, and that would be a huge leg up, at least on the Viltrumite side, because Viltrumites don't really have ranged attacks outside of, like, weaponry, and maybe, like, chucking gigantic objects at people. With Ki, they actually have access to ranged attacks, as well as various other things. Saiyans also have access to transformations to further bolster their abilities. Not just Super Saiyan, but also Ozaru, assuming this hybrid still has their tail. Just a flat 10 times boost to their power is still pretty damn good. And of course, the most notable feature of Saiyans is their Zenkai boosts. Whenever they suffer injuries, especially serious injuries, upon recovering, they get a pretty substantial boost to their power. And, at least in Super, they can also get Zenkai boosts mid-combat. Though you could call that a sort of a retcon or a new addition specific to Super. That's your personal choice, I guess, because I don't necessarily remember a time that happened mid-combat in Dragon Ball Z. But that's besides the point. They have Zenkai boosts. Now that we've discussed what the separate warrior races bring to the table that the others don't have, let's look at the 3 things they have in common. There are other things, of course, but these are just some general abilities or traits that they both share. They both have a degree of natural fighting talent. Being, warrior races, fighting is kinda in their blood, which is why they're able to pick it up pretty quickly. They're both naturally aggressive and have a degree of savagery to them, at least... Well, not the Earth Saiyans, but most Saiyans had natural aggression and savagery. I mean, even Goku did before hitting his head. They also both obviously have high pain tolerance. I mean, like, an Invincible, Viltrumites can... Oh, I'm sorry, I just hit my mic. An Invincible, they get, like, the Viltrumite special getting impaled right through the torso, and they end up being pretty much, well, not fine, but they stay conscious. So, now let's really get into it. So, racial synergy, specifically how their abilities benefit each other. Or more specifically, how Saiyan DNA benefits Viltrumites a ton, and vice versa. So, when you take into account that Viltrumites can recover from injuries much faster than even Saiyans, at least normally, that leaves them a lot more room to get, Zenkai boosts, because they can survive damage much more easily unless they get, like, a large portion of their heart or their brain destroyed. They can recover and get massive Zenkai boosts because their bodies are much hardier. As mentioned before, they also have the addition of Ki with the physical prowess of Viltrumite. Saiyans obviously are also not pushovers, they have strong physical abilities as well. But this basically means that they not only have the strength of Saiyans and Viltrumites, they also have Ki, which means they're deadly at pretty much any range. And with the longevity of Viltrumites, obviously this hybrid could choose from constantly fighting. We've seen what, Saiyans like Goku and Vegeta, who've only lived like a few decades, can get from Zenkai boosts. Imagine thousands of years of that. And the addition of transformation, Uzaru can boost them 10 times, and they get that for free, assuming this hybrid has a tail, like in this image I have here, which, by the way, is from Spargado on DeviantArt. Go check them out, it's pretty good. But, obviously, if they train, they can unlock Super Saiyan, or, go through emotional shit and unlock Super Saiyan. And then, Super Saiyan 2, and potentially even Super Saiyan 3, assuming they're capable. And with them both being very savage and aggressive races, naturally both sides would be getting a boost from, rage or an emotional state. So, yeah, they have a lot that complements each other. A Saiyan Viltrumite hybrid would be insane in either verse, but let's talk specifics. I don't have another page for this, so just look at this cool pic by Spargado, while I just kind of ramble on about how powerful it would be. So, let's look at Invincible. Alright, so, let's get this out of the way. Omni-Man is not planetary. I know he destroyed a planet, but, let's look at that feat. Omni-Man did not destroy the planet on his own. He had two other very powerful Viltrumites doing it with him. And before that, Space Racer destabilized the core, further reducing, the power they would need to shatter the planet. So I wouldn't say that's planet level, I'd say that's like multi-continental, maybe you could call it moon level, but not planetary at that moment. But considering that Thaddeus, Mark, or Thaddeus, Mark, and Nolan got basically no-diffed by Thrag. Thrag later went on to fight Battle Beast and trained against Ragnars and stuff like that. And then Mark was obviously going like one-on-one against Thrag, at least in the sun. I would say we could scale to like small planet level or Earth planet level. That's way below Dragon Ball. Let's just get that out of the air. I plan on making a video about like the absurd scaling of Dragon Ball and stuff like that. But yeah, Invincible is way below. In the Saiyan saga, we had Planet Busters. It's generally agreed that it takes a power level of 10,000 to destroy a planet. Vegeta had 18,000, and then 10 times from Rosario on top of that. So, like, they were planet level in, like, the first major arc of Dragon Ball Z. Then, solar system level in the Cell Saga. And, we start getting into galaxy level in the Buu Saga. And then Super has universe level, but we're not getting into Super for this discussion. Point is, if we assume this is on the higher end of Viltrumites, it would be baseline planet level, probably with a power level, I guess, if we want to be around 10,000 or higher, like, as a baseline, without, like, tons of training. Like, Vegeta's Saiyan Saga level training, where he's, like, basically just practiced his moves, not really done, like, super intense training to really boost up his power level and stuff like that. So, base power with no real, like, serious training, we'll say this hybrid could be with a power level around 10,000, so planet level. Then, after, like, thousands of years and stuff, not even, if it's going through the Dragon Ball arcs, but point is, this hybrid could live for thousands of years, and we have seen beings in Dragon Ball that live for far more than that, being very powerful. Of course, there's like Majin Buu and Beerus. There's also Hit, who says he's over 1,000 years old. So, we've seen people who only live for like Saiyans who live for only like a few decades obtain incredible power even before Super. I mean, look at Goku. He was like boxing with Kid Buu, who is probably galaxy level. It was implied that he could destroy a galaxy in like the span of a few years, as stated by Shin, Supreme Kai. I personally just think that Kid Buu could have destroyed a whole galaxy, but he just didn't think to. But yeah, there's not much more to say without getting way too in-depth about this, and I don't actually know how much more time I have in this recording, because my thing is kind of bugging right now. So, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video here, and I might make a part 2 later, like, looking at this hypothetical hybrid in some Dragon Ball Z arcs. Alright, so I'll see you guys next time.